ESPN Football Power Index. It has been something that over the past couple of years has been really getting pushed by a lot of people when evaluating certain teams. And today I want to look at just what goes into FPI and why it is a extremely flawed system. So by its own account, FPI is a predictive rating system. Now let's look at how it decides what goes into its rankings. It includes strength of record. That's a big thing. Strength of schedule. Its predicted offense, defense, and special teams component. The ratings number of points each unit is expected to contribute to the team's net scoring margin on a neutral field. So right here, it says in the preseason, these components are made up of data from previous seasons, but it states that as the year goes on, beginning in week 1, it declines in weight as the season progresses. This is key because a lot has been made that, hey, the preseason FPI rankings are flawed, but by its own account, that's fine because it uses previous seasons. But as the year goes on, it should get more accurate, which is just not true. If you go look at, this is the 2025 FPI rankings at the end of the year. So this is when all the games have been played, all the games are considered, even the bowl games. Even just looking at this top 5, you should see a glaring issue, right? 1 is Indiana. That makes sense. They won the national title. 2, though, is Ohio State, not Miami. Miami played in the national title game, but okay, maybe that can be justified. You know, even though they played on a neutral field, Miami did have 3 losses, and Ohio State only had 2, and Ohio State was great for most of the year. Then somehow Notre Dame is 3. Notre Dame did not play in the college football playoff, but again, maybe you can justify it because Notre Dame did blow out most of their opponents. But I want to point to one team that makes absolutely no sense. It's unjustifiable for their position, and it kind of highlights the real problem with FPI, and that is Arkansas. Arkansas went 2-10. If you were to guess their position, you'd probably guess somewhere in like the 80s, 90s. They were 42. This makes no sense. They went 2-10. If you look at their schedule, we can bring it up. They did not beat a single Power 4 team last year. Let's go ahead and look at the schedule. They played Alabama A&M week 1. They played Arkansas State week 2. They blew both of them out. From that point on, they did not win a single game. They lost to Ole Miss, Memphis, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Auburn, Mississippi State, LSU, Texas, and Missouri. Now, I will give you, this is a very difficult schedule. They played in a lot of close games. However, the problem is they did not win a single game against a Power 4 team, and you have, by your own rankings, them rated at 42nd. This gets really alarming when we look back at the rankings. They're rated 1 spot ahead of Duke. Duke won the ACC. Duke had 9 wins. Yes, they had some losses, like a loss to Tulane, but Arkansas themselves lost to Memphis, a non-Power 4 team. They're rated above Arizona State, NC State. They're not even rated as the lowest SEC team. They're rated above Kentucky and Mississippi State. Mississippi State is rated 58, 16 spots below Arkansas. Looking at their schedule from last year, they went 4-8, or sorry, 5-7. They went 5-7, 5-8. Sorry, they went 5-8. Played in a bowl game. They had wins over Southern Miss, Arizona State, Alcorn State, Northern Illinois, and Arkansas. They literally beat Arkansas in Arkansas, and somehow are rated below Arkansas in the FPI rankings. They also have a win over Arizona State, who ended up making a bowl game. This just doesn't make sense. How can a team that played on the road and beat you, have 3 more wins than you in the regular season, be rated below you in your own rankings? You just can't justify these rankings. A lot of the criticism of FPI is that it has been inherently SEC biased. But when you look at the rankings, even in the SEC, it doesn't make sense. If a team goes on the road and beats them by FPI's own standard, that should be a huge bump to them. Yet somehow there's 16 spots between them. Arkansas is just a perfect example of a team that is ranking just doesn't make sense. It goes directly to the contradiction of these rankings. Also, Kentucky, by the way, themselves won 5 games. They won 2 games in the SEC. They beat Florida and they beat Auburn. Yet somehow they are also below Arkansas as well. They have a I understand they got blown out a couple of times, but that goes to the inherent problem with FPI. FPI considers if a game was close or not, which is a good thing. If a game is close against a really good team, you should get a little bit of a bump as opposed to beating, say, Tennessee Tech. However, it goes too far. It gives too much credit to close games as opposed to wins. When you look at teams like Mississippi State and like Kentucky, who were able to get wins in the same conference as Arkansas, by the way, yet they get no credit because they got blown out once or twice or 3 times in Kentucky's case. And that's not okay. That's not a good thing that we should be considering because Arkansas's case, yes, their games were close, but they didn't win any of them. And at a certain point, wins have to matter. A lot has been made of that. Hey, we should look at the strength of schedule and we should look at all this stuff. At a certain point, though, you have to win games. You can't just sit here and say, oh, well, we played 4 close games, so we're better than this team. You have to at least win something to show that you are a good team, as opposed to, yeah, we're good, but we're not on that level. And in Arkansas's case, yes, they played a lot of close games and they may have even had a lot of talent, but it goes beyond that. It goes to coaching, it goes to discipline, it goes to on the field play calling. All of that should be considered when we consider how good of a team somebody is. Coaching matters. We saw that with Indiana. Kurt Signetti, the reason that Indiana was able to beat other teams was because they're a much better coached team. So when we compare them to other teams with more talent than Indiana, you have to also consider, hey, Signetti's going to have them disciplined. He's going to have them well coached. What is, let's say, another team that they play? Look at Florida last year. They were very poorly coached. So yeah, they had a lot of talent. I like DJ Lagway, who's going to be at Baylor this year, but they weren't a good coach team, and that's why Billy Napier ended up getting fired. Look at Arkansas. They were a very poorly coached team. That's why they ended up firing Sam Pittman. Now, yes, they have a new coach this year, but the point is we're only looking at last year. We're not looking ahead to this year. And I think that just shows the problem with FPI. It says it's going to consider all these factors, but at the end of the day, it doesn't consider the most important thing, and that is wins. It goes too far to say, hey, if you play a tough schedule, you get a huge bump. And too much of a bump, in my opinion, because that is what happened to Arkansas. And now that has a domino effect. Every team that played Arkansas now can say, hey, we beat the 42nd best team by your own power index, which gives us an artificial bump. It gives the whole conference an artificial bump. So that is why there are so many SEC teams so high. I don't just want to make this an SEC bias video, though, because I think that goes, away from the point I want to make, which is FPI just in general is bad. So the final thing I want to do is look at 3 teams ranked in the top 6: Notre Dame, Texas Tech, and Miami. These 3 teams all ranked top 6. 2 of them actually played each other. Let's look at the schedule here. Miami is ranked 5th. They were runner-ups last year. They had wins over Ole Miss, Ohio State, A&M, Pitt, Florida State, South Florida, Notre Dame. So they did have 3 losses, Louisville by 3, SMU by 3 or 6 in overtime, and at Indiana neutral field in the college football playoff game. Now, the SMU game was on the road, and remember, it does take into account if it was on the road or at home. It takes that into account. Let's look at Texas Tech. Texas Tech finished the year 12-2. They had 2 losses, one by Ford at Arizona State, which isn't a very good loss, and in Oregon by 23, which isn't very close. But look at the rest of their schedule, right? They blew out literally everybody they played. When I say they blew them out, they did not play a close game the whole season, except for their only loss. Other than that, every game was a 2-possession game or more. They blew out BYU. They blew out twice. They blew out BYU twice. They blew out Utah. They blew out Houston. They blew out UCF, West Virginia. They blew out everybody. Now let's look at Notre Dame. Notre Dame finished 10-2, And somehow, out of all three of these teams, they're ranked the highest. They did lose at Miami by 3, but remember, it did say, hey, it considers if it's at home or on the road, which, okay, fine. Then they lost against Texas A&M. They lost that game by 1, another very close loss. The rest of the year, they didn't lose a game. But look at who they're beating. They're beating Purdue and Arkansas and Boise State, NC State. They had really 2 tough games the whole year, USC and Pitt. NC State will also shout out them. They were all right. And according to FPI, I guess Arkansas is 42nd somehow. So now let's look back at the FPI rankings. Those 3 teams, you'd probably think out of those 3, Notre Dame is 3rd. Somehow, though, they're 1st out of those 3 teams, even though Miami beat them, and Miami beat teams like Ohio State. Miami ended up beating Texas A&M. Miami ended up beating Ole Miss. So they beat some very good teams when you consider the whole schedule. Remember, FPI at this point is considering your bowl games and your playoff games as well. It's considering everything. Texas Tech did lose in the first round of the playoff game, and it was not a very close game. It was a 23-point loss, but they themselves went 12-2. They won their conference. They had 2 big wins over BYU. That's better, and a win over Utah. Those 3 wins right there are better than any win that Notre Dame had. And by the way, those weren't close games either. They blew all of those teams out by 20 plus points. They blew out every team they played by 22. So if the argument for FPI is, well, Notre Dame played 2 good teams, lost 2 close games, so it blew everybody else out. And even though those teams aren't the best, they blew them out. Texas Tech did the same thing. Texas Tech blew everybody out. They played, yes, the Arizona State loss. I get it. That one's not the best loss, but they had much better wins. So how does that make sense? How is it that Notre Dame is rated as higher than those 3 teams? I just don't know. Because Louisville, by the way, is 28th. SMU is 23rd. Those are the 2 losses Miami had other than the number 1 team, Indiana. And Miami had wins over the number 2 team, Ohio State, the number 3 team, Notre Dame. They had win over all of those teams. Texas Tech had wins twice over the 17th team, BYU, and over the 8th team, Utah, both by 20 plus. So again, I just don't understand this. I don't want this to just be a SEC hate video where it's like, oh, the SEC, they get overrated every year, even though, yes, I think these rankings do kind of show a SEC bias. Like, look at BYU being below Vandy. I don't really get that. BYU went 12-2, but whatever. Even like, I mean, I just now noticed this too. Vandy being above Oklahoma to me doesn't make much sense. I don't know how you justify that. They both went 10-3. Vandy lost to Iowa in their bowl game. Oklahoma lost to Alabama in their bowl game. And Oklahoma, in the regular season, had better wins. They beat Michigan. They beat some other teams. So I don't even know how you can justify that. Overall, the main problem with FPI is this. It just doesn't put enough stock in wins. It puts too much stock in, blowouts and close losses. But when you actually win the games, it just feels like there's not enough stock in a win versus, say, I don't know, it puts stock in if you blow a team out or, a close loss, you get not a lot of stock versus actually winning the game. It feels like you get the same amount of stock if you lose it by 3 versus winning by 3. Let's say Miami and Notre Dame are going to play again this year. It feels like FPI, if that's a 3-point game, they'll give both teams the same amount of credit. And I do think that is a problem. I think it's something that should be fixed. And that is why come the end of the year, I don't really care when people bring up FPI because I think overall it is shown to be flawed and it's going to continue to be flawed. And this is a good example. Anyways, that's all I got. I've been ranting a little too long about this, but if you made it this far, thanks, I guess. Maybe subscribe, I guess, like it. You could comment. I like talking about college football constantly, so I'll talk about anything. But that's all I got. So thanks for watching.